An idol that turned into a pro wrestler? Well, you've definitely got my attention, but it turns out this isn't exactly a story filled with happiness, but one with hard work and perseverance. Stick around. In this episode of Otaku Files, we take a look at the ups and downs of Itoh Maki. Most of us outside of Japan may not be aware of some of the more interesting personalities within the Japanese otaku landscape, so I thought I'd do a little video series and try to shed some light on these individuals. This is Otaku Files. There are many in Japan that wish to be an idol. It's hard to get an exact figure, but according to one survey, there are said to be at least 8,000 idols in Japan. However, only a handful of those idols are actually successful enough to make a living out of it, with the rest needing to do something additional. With that being said, out of all their options, you might not think that some idols would consider pro wrestling. Enter Itoh Maki, the self-proclaimed cutest in the world, an idol that turned into a pro wrestler.
I will kick your ass, bitch!
Wait, so she's not an idol anymore, you say? Well, as well as being the cutest in the world, she's also known as the Fired Idol. Oh, and she's also known for sticking up her middle finger during matches, but anyway, we'll get more into that a bit later. Maki was born and raised in the city of Ogori, located in the prefecture of Fukuoka. She always had a somewhat flamboyant personality, even from when she was small, and loved to stick out from the crowd. As a result, she would favor brands that produced kawaii clothes, meaning they were often colorful and most likely not what the other kids in her rural city were wearing, which, as you can imagine, didn't really go down that well for her at school. This is Japan after all. It wasn't just her fashion sense though. Maki just had a hard time connecting with others and felt that no matter what she did, she would just end up being hated and bullied. To get through that rough period, she kept thinking to herself that she would get back at everyone by becoming rich and famous. She aimed to be a mangaka and spent most of her free time drawing and creating stories. Those creative sessions were when Maki felt like she could truly be herself. However, once she entered middle school, Maki ended up with a different goal. The reason for that was a boy that she had developed a crush on. She wanted to do everything she could to get as close to him as possible, even deciding to go to the same cram school as him. Cute or a bit stalkerish, you decide. One day, Maki found out something that would eventually end up changing the course of her life. The boy she had a crush on was a fan of a particular idol, AKB48's Kashiwagi Yuki. Apparently, he even said he wanted to marry her. Because of that, Maki decided that she was going to become an idol and that she was going to marry him instead. Sounds like a plan. Anyway, I'm not sure how long this infatuation lasted, but thanks to her crush's influence, she started getting into idols herself, and even ended up really liking AKB48's TV show, AK Bingo. Except, she wasn't watching just as a fan, but trying to understand it from the perspective of the AKB48 members, thinking of what she would do instead of them. Yep, she was serious, and thought that through being an idol, she could also get back at those that bullied her. Maki unfortunately also failed to get into any of the high schools she actually wanted to go to, and in any case, didn't have anything in particular she wanted to study, so being an idol didn't seem like a bad option. That's when she discovered a local idol group that just formed named Linku, who were apparently distributing their flyers on the street. Local idols weren't as common back then, so Maki took this as an opportunity and decided to apply for Linku's second generation audition. She even lost 3 kilos, which I guess ended up being worth it since she did manage to pass. However, what was in store for her wasn't exactly the idol life she was expecting. Maki wasn't placed in the main group at first. She was put into Linku's trainee group, QT, as opposed to being a quote-unquote lady. Ladies were the main performers. The QTs did things like sell tickets, attend handshake events, I guess you could call them meet and greets, and on occasion be allowed to perform. Those that were attractive or could dance well became a lady really quickly, but after 3 months, with all the other trainees making their debuts, Maki started to get worried. But she never gave up, and finally after 6 months, she became a lady. Having said that, her popularity didn't really increase, and apparently she wasn't put on stage as much as the others. In fact, she says she was the least popular member in Link Q, which probably made the meet and greets a pretty painful experience for her. While those that came into the group at the same time as her were becoming popular and advancing, she was just struggling. Needless to say, mentally it affected Maki quite a lot. Maki blamed herself and started sinking into a darker place, until one day she found it hard to get out of bed in the morning. Not being able to get enough school credits, she would also end up dropping out of high school. However, a couple of years after entering Lin-Q, Maki would take part in an event that would open up a different path for her in life. Making a promotional appearance, she would take part in an idol lumberjack match for a Japanese professional wrestling promotion known as DDT Pro Wrestling. Seems like she was flipping that bird from day one. Apparently, she wasn't exactly wrestling herself though. As a lumberjack, she did things like attack wrestlers who fell out of the ring with an inflatable object. However, she ended up making quite the impression on the DDT president, Takagi Sanshiro, who Maki apparently headbutted. Takagi Sanshiro would then ask her if she would give pro wrestling a chance. Maki wasn't sure about doing pro wrestling at first. In her mind, it was the complete opposite of the pure image idols have, so initially she would turn DDT down when they made her offers for another appearance. But with performing the same songs while doing the same choreography again and again, part of her was a little fed up with being an idol, so she did want to do something different. Even though pro wrestling carried the risk of injury, which would also be detrimental to the idol side of things, she would eventually take up those offers from DDT to do more guest appearances. And through those guest appearances, she started to really enjoy entertaining the crowd and started to think that maybe she was more suited to doing pro wrestling.
Stay safe and have a nice day. What up?
But Maki was really struggling around that time, and at one point she even went on hiatus with her Lin-Q activities. She says there were times that she really thought about taking her own life, and would even regularly imagine herself jumping in front of a train. One thing that's got her through this dark period of her life was actually a TV show called Mecha Mecha Ikiteru. She couldn't watch anything else because she would feel jealous and frustrated that she wasn't a part of that world. But being a fan of the comedian Okamura Takashi and seeing him trying to get over his own struggles helped motivate Maki to continue with her own pursuits. She managed to return to her idol activities and pull herself out of her depression. Maki then made the bold decision to move to Tokyo to start her training. She didn't tell her father though. In fact, she only told two people, her mother and someone high up in Lin-Q. She knew her father would be against her moving, but she wanted to start her new life and thought that things would be alright once she made it to Tokyo. But it wasn't going to be that easy. Maki had no money, and in order to survive, she worked various jobs while training to be a pro wrestler. Because of this, her idol activities suffered greatly, and she would even forget some of the choreography. Not only that, her pro wrestling training was no joke. Her coach was really strict, and apparently she ended up crying on more than one occasion. After 6 grueling months, Maki was finally able to make her wrestling debut with a singles match against Yamashita Miyu in December 2016. Even though she took quite a beating, a lot of fans came to the merch stand after the match and praised her, which felt good, and any pain she was feeling just vanished. Now, she did start to gain popularity as a pro wrestler, but the idol side of things went a bit south. Lin-Q would undergo a restructuring, and Maki was left out of the picture. Apparently, she needed to sell a certain amount of tickets to stay in the group, but despite achieving that, she was still let go. But Maki was alright with it. She was already doing well as a wrestler and didn't really want to carry on as an idol anyway. In fact, her reaction to the news would push her popularity even further. She immediately shared on Twitter that she had been fired, and during her entrance to an idol lumberjack match with Takigawa Azusa, she stopped the music being played, which just so happened to be a Lin-Q song, then tells the crowd that she was fired, and then proceeds to sing a cover of a different idol group. This whole thing apparently would end up going viral on Japanese Twitter, giving birth to Itoh Maki, the fired idol. Her being the fired idol would also help her gain fame overseas, with some of her English tweets gaining thousands of likes. I'm sure Maki would have never imagined she would end up in a squared circle from the time she had a crush on that boy, but she definitely seems a lot more happier now than she did back then. As always, links in the description box below so you can find out what she's been up to lately. Anyway, that's gonna do it for this video, guys. Thank you so much for watching. A complete first for me to cover this kind of idol. Thank you very much for the suggestion. I did know about Maki before. She seems to be known even in the English-speaking influencer space, but I definitely thought she would be interesting to cover. Let me know your thoughts and opinions in the comment section below, along with any suggestions for future videos. Thank you again, guys. Look forward to more coming your way. Take care. Peace.